Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People's Story. My wife and I had just moved into what we thought was our dream home 3 months ago. It was in one of those picture-perfect suburban neighborhoods where every lawn looked like it belonged in a magazine and the mailboxes were all painted the exact same shade of forest green. We'd saved for years to afford the down payment on this place, and I'll admit, I felt pretty proud pulling into that driveway for the first time. I'm a custom furniture maker, been doing it for about 8 years now. I work out of a shop I rent across town, building everything from kitchen cabinets to dining room sets for people with more money than sense. It's good work, honest work, and it pays the bills. The only thing is, I need my truck to haul materials and finished pieces to clients. It's a 2019 Ford F250 diesel, white with a crew cab. Nothing fancy, no company logos or anything, just a clean, well-maintained work truck that I take care of like it's my child. About 2 weeks after we moved in, I noticed this woman who seemed to always be outside when I came and went. She looked to be in her late 50s, always carrying a clipboard and wearing this expression like she'd just smelled something unpleasant. She drove a massive black Escalade that probably got about 8 miles to the gallon. Every time I'd pull into my driveway, she'd stop whatever she was doing and just stare. Made my skin crawl, honestly. The first real interaction I had with her was when I was unloading some lumber from my truck bed. She walked over with that clipboard clutched to her chest and introduced herself as the HOA board president. "I'm sure you'll find our community standards very reasonable," she said in this condescending tone. "We pride ourselves on maintaining property values here." I just nodded and said something polite about looking forward to being part of the neighborhood. She looked at my truck for a long moment, wrote something on her clipboard, and walked away without another word. That should have been my first warning sign. The violation notice showed up about a week later. It was typed on official-looking letterhead and stated that my vehicle was not in compliance with community aesthetic standards and needed to be remedied immediately. No specific bylaw cited, no explanation of what exactly was wrong. I figured it was either a mistake or some cranky neighbor trying to stir up trouble, so I tossed it in the trash and forgot about it. Big mistake. The morning everything went to hell, I had an early delivery scheduled. I was supposed to drop off a custom dining set to this high-end client across town by 8 a.m. The piece had taken me 3 weeks to build, and they were paying me a hefty bonus for getting it done on time. I woke up at 6:30, grabbed my coffee, and headed out to warm up the truck. My driveway was empty. For a second, I just stood there with my coffee mug in my hand, thinking I was still half asleep. Then the panic hit. My truck was gone. My livelihood was gone. I ran back inside and called 911 to report it stolen. That's when my neighbor from across the street came jogging over. He's a nice guy, works some office job downtown. He looked nervous as hell. "Hey, I saw what happened earlier," he said, glancing around like he was worried someone might overhear. "It wasn't stolen, the HOA had it towed." I thought I'd misheard him. "What do you mean the HOA had it towed?" He explained that around 6 a.m., a tow truck had shown up with the HOA president standing right there on the sidewalk. "She watched the whole thing with this smug smile on her face," he said. Even took pictures with her phone. The cold anger that washed over me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever felt. This woman had just cost me thousands of dollars and possibly ruined my relationship with an important client, all because she didn't like the look of my truck. I called the HOA management number from the packet we'd gotten when we moved in. After being transferred 3 times, I finally got through to the queen herself. "This is regarding the unauthorized towing of my vehicle from my own driveway," I said, trying to keep my voice level. Her response was pure ice. "Your vehicle violated community bylaws. It had to be removed." "What specific bylaw did it violate?" "As I'm sure you read in the covenants you signed, only gasoline-powered passenger vehicles are permitted in driveways. Your commercial-grade diesel truck is an eyesore and a pollutant." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you officially stating that the HOA policy is gasoline vehicles only and that my truck was towed for being a diesel?" "That's correct. The call is being recorded for quality assurance purposes, by the way." "Good," I said. "So is this one. For my records." She didn't even pause. "Yes, diesel vehicles are prohibited. The towing was completely justified." I hung up and immediately called the impound lot. The fees came to $547 to get my truck back. Then I had to call my client and explain why their dining set wasn't going to be delivered on time. They were understanding, but canceled the bonus, which cost me another $800. All told, this woman's power trip had just cost me over $1,300, not counting the damage to my professional reputation. That evening, I sat down with a bottle of whiskey and the 247-page HOA covenant document. I read every single word, taking notes as I went. The vehicle section was on page 78. It prohibited unlicensed vehicles, vehicles in disrepair, and commercial vehicles. Commercial vehicles were defined as those with business lettering or over 12,000 pounds gross weight. My truck had no lettering and weighed about 7,500 pounds. There was absolutely no mention of fuel type anywhere in the entire document. The next morning, I got an email that had been sent to the entire neighborhood. It was from the HOA president clarifying vehicle rules. She stated that non-standard fuel type vehicles such as diesels were not permitted in driveways. She was retroactively trying to cover her tracks. I decided to handle this the right way and signed up to speak at the next monthly HOA meeting, which was in 3 days. The meeting was held in the community center, a bland beige room with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly sick. About 20 residents showed up, plus the 5-person HOA board. The president sat at the head table with this satisfied look on her face, like she was holding court. When my turn came to speak, I calmly presented my case. I had copies of the actual bylaws, receipts from the towing fees, and a transcript of our recorded phone conversation. I explained that I'd been charged for violating a rule that didn't exist. The board's response was exactly what I expected. They closed ranks around their president immediately. "She knows these rules better than anyone," said one board member. "We trust our president's interpretation of the covenants," said another. They voted unanimously to uphold the fine and the towing. The president smiled at me across the room like she just won the lottery. As I walked out of that meeting, I wasn't defeated. I was armed. I had their lies on record, their bylaws in my pocket, and a plan forming in my head. The first call I made the next morning was to a property law attorney I found online. His name was David, and he specialized in HOA disputes. After I explained the situation and sent him all my documentation, he was practically laughing. "This is the most clear-cut case I've seen in years," he said. "They have absolutely no legal standing." Within a week, David had sent a formal demand letter to the HOA. It was a thing of beauty, 5 pages of legal language that essentially boiled down to pay up or get sued. We demanded full reimbursement for the towing fees, the impound costs, my documented lost income, and David's legal fees. The letter gave them 14 days to pay in full. While we waited for their response, I decided to have a little fun. I went back through the bylaws with a fine-tooth comb, looking for any loopholes I could exploit. That's when I noticed something interesting. There was no mention of electric vehicles anywhere. The rules had been written before electric cars became common. I called up a car rental place and asked if they had any electric vehicles. They had one, a bright lime green Tesla Model S that had been returned from some promotional event. I rented it for a week and parked it in the exact same spot where my truck had been. 2 days later, the HOA president was at my door. "What is that garish vehicle doing in your driveway?" she demanded. I gave her my biggest, friendliest smile. "Hi there! I took your feedback to heart about the diesel truck. This baby runs completely silent and produces 0 emissions. I'm just trying to be the best community member I can be." Her face went through about 6 different shades of red. "This is not what the bylaws intended." "But it's not diesel," I said cheerfully. "And it's not gasoline either. I thought you'd be proud of me for going green." She stormed off muttering about technicalities, but there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. Over the next week, I started talking to my neighbors, not to complain, just to listen. What I discovered was that I wasn't alone. The woman next door had been fined $200 because her basketball hoop was supposedly the wrong shade of black. The family 2 houses down had been cited for having a garden gnome that was inconsistent with community aesthetics. Most interesting was the old gentleman who lived at the end of the street. He restored classic cars as a hobby and had been harassed by the HOA president for months. She'd tried to get his 1967 Camaro declared a non-functioning vehicle, even though he drove it every weekend. I started putting together a file of every ridiculous fine and citation the HOA had issued in the past year. The pattern was clear. The board president was on a power trip, and the rest of the board was too scared or too lazy to stop her. 2 weeks after the demand letter was sent, we got the HOA response. They sent a check for the towing fee, $547, but refused to pay for my lost wages or legal fees. They claimed the towing was justified based on community standards and that any other damages were speculative. David just smiled when I showed him the check. Perfect. Now we take them to small claims court. Filing in small claims was brilliant for several reasons. First, it was cheap, only cost $50 to file. Second, it would become a matter of public record. Third, the HOA couldn't bring their high-powered attorneys into small claims court. It would just be me, them, and a judge. The hearing was scheduled for a month later. I spent that time gathering every piece of evidence I could find. Photos of my truck, copies of the bylaws, receipts for everything, and that beautiful recording of the HOA president admitting she'd made up the gasoline-only rule. The day of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse wearing my best suit. The HOA sent 2 board members, including the president. She was dressed like she was going to a country club luncheon and kept checking her phone like she had more important places to be. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who looked like she'd heard every excuse in the book. I presented my case methodically. I played the recording of the HOA president stating that diesel vehicles were prohibited. I showed the actual bylaws that contained no such restriction. I presented receipts for all my costs. When it was their turn, the HOA defense fell apart immediately. The president tried to argue that diesel trucks were obviously not appropriate for a residential neighborhood, but when the judge asked her to point to the specific bylaw that prohibited them, she couldn't do it. "Ma'am," the judge said, "are you telling me that you authorized the towing of this man's vehicle based on a rule that doesn't exist in your written covenants?" The president started backpedaling, claiming there were implied standards and community expectations, but the judge wasn't buying any of it. "The law is quite clear," the judge said. "Homeowners associations can only enforce rules that are explicitly written in their governing documents. You cannot make up rules as you go along." She ruled in my favor on every count. The HOA had to pay me $547 for the towing, $800 for my loss bonus, $400 for my legal fees, and another $200 in court costs. Total, $1,947. But the money wasn't the best part. The best part was the lecture the judge gave to the HOA representatives about abuse of power and the importance of following their own rules. The story made the local news the next day. The headline was "Local HOA Ordered to Pay Homeowner for Illegal Towing." The article included quotes from the judge's ruling and made the HOA board look like petty tyrants. That's when things really got interesting. I called my neighbor who restored classic cars and a few other residents who'd been harassed by the board. We decided it was time for new leadership. According to the HOA bylaws, any group of homeowners representing at least 25% of the homes could call for a special election to recall board members. We got the signatures in 3 days. The recall election was held 2 weeks later. The community center was packed. More people showed up than had attended any HOA meeting in years. One by one, the old board members were voted out. The president lost by a margin of 67 to 8. The new board's first official act was to nullify all the ridiculous fines that had been issued over the past year and refund the money to homeowners who'd already paid. A month later, I was in my driveway on a Saturday morning washing my diesel truck. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and my F-250 was gleaming like new. I'd used part of the settlement money to build a custom wooden garage door that perfectly matched our house, something I knew the old HOA would have found a reason to reject. As I finished rinsing off the soap, my neighbor walked over with a beer in his hand. "Sounds good," he said as I started up the truck to move it into the garage. The quiet, powerful rumble of the diesel engine echoed off the houses. It was the sound of honest work, of freedom, and of justice served. The former HOA president still lived in the neighborhood, but she kept to herself now. I'd see her getting her mail or taking out trash, always avoiding eye contact. Her reign of terror was over, and everyone knew it. They tried to take my livelihood over the sound of my engine, but in the end, the only thing that got towed was their power, and our neighborhood had never been quieter or more peaceful. But this story isn't quite over yet. There's actually an update that happened a few months later that makes this whole saga even more satisfying. Update. The sweet, sweet karma finally caught up. So it's been about 6 months since I posted the original story about my diesel truck getting towed by our psycho HOA president. A lot of people asked for updates, and boy do I have one for you. Remember how I mentioned the former HOA president still lived in the neighborhood but kept to herself? Well, that didn't last long. Turns out losing all that power didn't sit well with her, and she decided to try a different approach to making everyone's lives miserable. About 3 months after the recall election, weird stuff started happening around the neighborhood. People were getting anonymous complaints filed with the city about various code violations. The family with the basketball hoop got visited by a city inspector about their unpermitted recreational structure. The guy with the classic cars got hit with a complaint about inoperable vehicles, even though his cars ran perfectly. At first, we couldn't prove who was behind it, but the pattern was obvious. Every house that had supported the recall was getting harassed with bogus city complaints. The former president was trying to use the city to do what the HOA couldn't do anymore. The breaking point came when she went after my neighbor's teenage daughter. This kid had started a small dog walking business to save money for college. Nothing fancy, just walking dogs for a few neighbors after school. Well, guess who called the city claiming there was an unlicensed commercial pet care operation running out of a residential home? A city inspector showed up and told the family they needed a business license, commercial insurance, and had to comply with all sorts of regulations that would have cost thousands of dollars for a 16-year-old walking 3 dogs twice a week. That's when I knew we had to do something. I called David, my lawyer from the small claims case, and explained what was happening. He was fascinated by the situation and agreed to look into it for free, just because he was curious about the legal implications. What David discovered was brilliant. Turns out, filing false or frivolous complaints with city departments is actually a misdemeanor in our state. If you knowingly file a complaint that you know is baseless or exaggerated, you can be charged with misuse of emergency services and face fines up to $5,000. But we needed proof. That's where my security cameras came in handy. I'd installed them after the truck incident to protect my property, and they covered a good view of the street. David suggested we check if any other neighbors had cameras that might have caught the former president doing surveillance on our houses. We hit the jackpot with the family across from the classic car guy. Their doorbell camera had captured the former president walking slowly past their house multiple times, taking pictures with her phone of the cars in the driveway. The timestamps matched exactly with when the city complaints were filed, but the real smoking gun came from an unexpected source. The old gentleman who restored classic cars, Tom, had gotten suspicious and installed his own camera system. He caught her red-handed going through his garbage cans one morning, presumably looking for evidence to include in her complaints. David was practically rubbing his hands together with glee when we showed him the footage. "This is harassment, stalking, filing false reports, and trespassing," he said. "We've got her dead to rights. We took everything to the police." At first, they seemed reluctant to get involved in what they saw as a neighborhood dispute. But when David explained the criminal aspects and showed them the evidence, their attitude changed completely. The detective assigned to the case was a woman named Rodriguez who had dealt with HOA drama before. She was not amused by the former president's antics. "I see this more often than you'd think," Detective Rodriguez told us. "People who lose power in their little kingdoms often escalate to using government agencies as weapons. It's abuse of the system and it's illegal. They set up a sting operation that was almost too easy." Detective Rodriguez had one of her colleagues who lived in a different part of town file a fake complaint about Tom's cars. Then they waited to see if the former president would take credit for it or try to escalate it. She took the bait like a hungry fish. The detective got a call 2 days later from the former president saying she was following up on the complaint about the classic cars and wanted to provide additional evidence of violations. She even offered to meet with the detective to hand over photos and documentation. They arrested her right there in the police station parking lot. The charges were impressive: filing false police reports, harassment, stalking, criminal trespassing, and misuse of city services. The bail was set at $2,500, which apparently her husband had to scrape together by borrowing against their retirement account. But here's the really sweet part. Her arrest made the local newspaper again with the headline, "Former HOA President Arrested for Filing False Complaints." The article detailed how she'd been systematically harassing neighbors who had voted against her. The story got picked up by a regional news blog that covers HOA horror stories, and then it went viral on social media. By the end of the week, there were memes about our situation floating around Facebook and Reddit. She became the poster child for HOA power trips gone wrong. The legal consequences kept getting better. The city attorney's office decided to make an example of her case because they were tired of dealing with frivolous complaints. They prosecuted her to the fullest extent of the law. At her sentencing hearing, the judge was not sympathetic at all. She got 6 months of probation, 100 hours of community service, and had to pay restitution to all the neighbors who had incurred costs dealing with the false complaints. She also had to pay a $3,000 fine to the city for wasting their resources. But the financial hit was just the beginning. The stress of the legal troubles apparently caused major problems in her marriage. Her husband, who seemed like a decent enough guy who'd just been trapped with a crazy wife, filed for divorce about 2 months after her arrest. The divorce got messy fast. Turns out she'd been using joint credit cards to pay for private investigators to dig up dirt on neighbors, hiring lawyers for frivolous lawsuits, and all sorts of other expenses related to her neighborhood vendetta. Her husband had no idea about any of it. When all the dust settled, she had to sell the house to pay for the divorce settlement and legal fees. The irony was perfect. She'd spent years obsessing over property values and trying to control what everyone else did with their homes, and in the end, she lost her own house because of her obsession. The day she moved out was like a block party, not because we were celebrating her misery, but because the whole neighborhood finally felt free. Kids were playing in the street again, people were actually talking to each other, and there was this sense of relief that had been missing for years. Tom started hosting monthly classic car meetups in his driveway, and half the neighborhood shows up to admire his restoration work. The teenager got her dog walking business back up and running, and she saved almost enough for her first year of college tuition. As for me, I ended up getting more business than I could handle. Word got around about how I'd stood up to the HOA, and apparently there are a lot of people who respect someone who fights back against petty tyrants. I've had to hire 2 part-time assistants to keep up with demand. The new HOA board is night and day different from the old one. They actually focus on maintaining common areas and organizing community events instead of harassing residents. They've updated the bylaws to be clearer and fairer, and they've instituted a process where any enforcement action has to be approved by at least 3 board members. Last weekend, I was out washing my truck again when the new HOA president stopped by. She's a retired teacher who actually cares about building community rather than wielding power. "You know," she said, "I never thought I'd say this, but that truck of yours is starting to grow on me. There's something honest about it." I laughed and offered her a beer. We sat on my porch for an hour, talking about the neighborhood and how much better things were now. The former president moved to another state, according to the gossip network. Good riddance. I hope she learned her lesson, but somehow I doubt it. People like that don't usually change, they just find new victims. The best part of this whole saga is that it brought our neighborhood together in a way that never would have happened otherwise. We have barbecues now, kids play together, and neighbors actually help each other out when needed. Sometimes the best way to build a community is to stand up to the people who are trying to destroy it. My diesel truck still runs like a dream, and every morning when I started up to head to work, that rumble reminds me that sometimes you have to fight for what's right. And when you do, justice doesn't just win, it completely demolishes the people who thought they could push you around. The end. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I went to middle school in the early 2010s, right before smartphones really took off. I got my first phone right before starting 6th grade. It was a slide phone with a pay-as-you-go plan that cost $0.10 per minute for calls and per text message sent or received. Worse yet, sending or receiving photos cost $0.25 each. It was very expensive, and my parents only gave me $100 a year for this. If I exceeded the amount, I had to cover the rest with my limited birthday and Christmas money I had. Fortunately, most of my friends were good about helping me preserve the balance. They would call and I'd let the call drop but immediately call back on a landline so it wouldn't count as a call, and they'd email me or message me on Skype for most things. Everything was good until Derek joined the group in 7th grade. At first we thought he was funny, but we quickly got fed up with him as he was very unpleasant and exhibited many antisocial behaviors. He started drama within the friend group and also caused issues between us and other kids outside of the group. He was manipulative and always played the victim when others rightfully called him out on his crap, and he knew how to charm parents, so getting rid of him was easier said than done. He was the one friend who didn't respect my phone situation. He very frequently texted me dumb memes, even though I told him multiple times to just email or Skype them to me instead, since picture text messages cost $0.25 each. Unfortunately, blocking phone numbers was a feature that was unavailable for this pay-as-you-go plan, so there was nothing I could do as he spammed my phone. One day he got mad at me for some reason and spammed my phone with memes. He must have sent me over 100 lolcats over text. He kept sending them until I lost service since my phone balance was depleted. I had lost the $40 remaining in my account as a result. I was extremely pissed and demanded that he pay me the $40 he had cost me, and he refused and said it wasn't his problem. I got home from school really upset and told my dad about the situation, expecting him to go and tear Derek's mother a new one and demand the money, but my dad said that it wasn't worth the battle. I even asked him about a small claims court, but he said that not all battles are worth fighting, and that the effort wasn't worth $40. He took me to the carrier's store and loaded $50 onto the phone. The carrier changed my phone number, and they managed to block Derek's number. They had initially said that blocking phone numbers wasn't possible with this plan, but my dad insisted and would not leave the store until they did it. I was extremely paranoid about my phone number being leaked and other kids spamming it to duck with me. Fortunately, my parents got iPhones that summer and got me one too, and the new family plan had an unlimited text plan. Nonetheless, I was pissed at the $40 he essentially stole from me out of malice. Fortunately, not too long after, there was a big blowout between Derek and the rest of the friend group at the end of the school year, and we permanently kicked him out of the group. He was an outcast the following year in 8th grade. Nobody was tolerating his crap anymore. And he changed schools the year after, and we never heard from him again. Fast forward to a few years ago, I was back home for a few months between graduating college and starting a new job on the other side of the country. I went out to some garage sales one Saturday morning and I ended up at Derek's house. I recognized his mother, but I don't think she recognized me. I guess glasses and a beard is all you need. I noticed some Pokemon napkins out for sale, and when I picked them up to look at them, Derek's mom said that her son had been obsessed with Pokemon for his whole life and that she was tired of Pokemon stuff occupying her home for so many years. I said that these napkins were for my younger cousin who is really into Pokemon and asked if she had any more Pokemon stuff. She said she didn't know people were still into that and that there were a few boxes in the attic with her son's old stuff. She actually took me inside the house, which I never imagined I'd set foot inside ever again, and let me climb up the attic ladder and take down several large boxes to look through. The first one had Christmas ornaments in it and other junk, but I freaked out inside when she opened a box jam packed with Pokemon video games in the original boxes, though I kept my cool on the outside. The whole reason I had agreed to go inside in the first place was because I was holding out hope of this exact scenario happening. See, I knew Derek was obsessed with Pokemon. Our friend group liked Pokemon back in the day, even when other kids thought it wasn't cool, but Derek was on a whole different level. He bragged about his Pokemon collection all the time. At the time, he had every single main series game in the original box, and in mint condition, as he always had to add in. I went to his house once and he was showing me his collection. He yelled at me for touching one of the games. Nobody was allowed to touch them except him. He had many older Nintendo games in excellent condition, but Pokemon was his favorite. He had had a couple of incidents with his mom damaging or throwing away his things. It wasn't out of malice, but just ignorance, as she didn't think the games or collectibles had any value. Fast forward into the present day, I was thinking about this when I asked his mother if she had any other Pokemon stuff. She ended up bringing out the mother lode. We opened all of the boxes she had me bring down. Within the boxes, there was the beloved collection of Pokemon games, all very well preserved, as well as several Nintendo consoles, hundreds of games, 24 binders full of Pokemon cards, and there was also a box of many Lego sets with the original boxes and everything, with many old Star Wars sets. When I saw Jango Fett, I knew I struck gold. I told her that I liked old Legos as well, and asked her how much for the 5 boxes of games, cards, and Lego sets, and she thought for a second and said $100 a box, or $400 for all 5. I told her I would take it all and hauled ass to get to an ATM. I loaded the 5 boxes into my dad's truck and immediately drove home. I knew there was potentially tens of thousands of dollars of goods here. This was the score of a lifetime, and I finally felt vindicated for the $40 Derek had taken from me all those years ago. I ended up giving all the stuff to my uncle, who's a hobbyist eBay reseller. He offered to sell it all. He was willing to go through the effort and sell everything individually, and despite my insistence, he said he wouldn't take more than a 10% cut of the profits after all fees and taxes. We went through and logged every single item along with the estimated value, and the total of the whole lot was about $40,000. 40,000 was a poetic number since this was 1,000x the value of what Derek stole from me all those years ago. My uncle sold most of the lot before the end of the summer and ended up writing me a check. Though it was considerably less than $40,000, it was still a life-changing amount of money for me. I was able to pay off my remaining student loans and put the rest towards a down payment on a new car. The next one is a malicious compliance story. For the last 10 years, I've been working from home as automation engineer for a relatively small company what produced custom-built industrial gas treatment units, industrial chillers, compressor stations, that sort of thing. My job was to write algorithms for PLCs, design HMI, and setting up data transfer for customer SCADA systems. Basically, I was the person who told machines what to do. I was getting significant below-market pay for such position, but with only 4-5 projects per year and each taking me 2-3 weeks to complete, I wasn't arguing since I was getting paid for mostly doing nothing, and I was fortunate enough to have considerable passive income thanks to lucky investments of my inheritance. Everything was great until a couple years ago when owner decided to retire and sold the company. So here comes new management with new policies. In my country, every worker entitled to at least 4 weeks of paid vacation time per year. All unspent vacation is rolled other to the next year, but you have to take at least 2 uninterrupted weeks per year. So if you only take your mandatory vacation, you accumulate 14 additional days per year. Given how much free time I actually had, I rarely used more than mandatory 2 weeks per year, always making sure there be no commissioning or maintenance planned during my vacation. During these events, I would remotely access maintenance engineer's laptop to make necessary adjustments to the algorithms, so everything works perfectly in real working conditions. But one of the first policies new management implemented was schedule-based vacations. So now O had to decide when I take my 2 weeks at the start of the year. I chose first weeks of April. In early March, I get a call from manager of the development team who asks me to come on a quick 3-day work trip to help maintenance engineer switch PLC and upload new project. Apparently, thanks to new maintenance team manager, a lot of maintenance engineers quit and they are short-stuffed, and the only one they can send ATM is bad with computer. Where isn't much for me to do since we had identical station going through the same PLC switch month prior, so I'll just fly there, chill until electrical panel is rewired, new PLC is installed when I just upload new project to PLC and fly home. I thought for myself and agreed to go. Apparently, maintenance engineer not only bad with computers, but also knows nothing about electrical work, so I had to do everything myself, which I am not actually qualified to do, but at this point I don't want to disappoint client, who turned out to be a bunch of really nice people, so after a week and with only 3 burned down fuses, I finished. After returning home, I inform my manager what I am not going to any more business trips since I don't get paid enough to also do maintenance engineer's work. First day of my vacation comes and I get another call. Despite my poor judgment, I decided to answer. Hey, we need you to go on another business trip starting next Monday. It will just take a week, for this project. I'm not familiar with that project. It was done while I was on paternity leave. In my country, either parent can take maternity leave up to 3 years, and after first 6 months, my wife asked me to switch. Yeah, we had to contract a specialist to do that project while you were on leave. I'll send it to you along with documentation right away. Disconnects, I check received project, and it is huge. 7 PLCs, 6 HMI panels, everything has to work as a single system, and project is a total mess. Nothing would work, you just has to do everything from scratch, will probably take me close to a month to finish. And that is with doing everything from comfort of my own home, where I am more productive, so I call back. Yeah, I looked at this project and that's a mess. It's not in the working condition and no way to finish it in a week. I'll do what I can do, but as I said last time, I'm doing it remotely. As always, I won't go on another business trip, especially now. I have many things planned for the next few weeks. I can't go. But reception on site is terrible. You won't be able to access it remotely. And we already missed all deadlines on this project. Client is pissed and we are looking at huge fines. CEO is breathing down my neck. We need it fixed yesterday. Then I'll email maintenance engineer project with changes each evening once he is in hotel with decent reception, and he can email me list of things what need fixing. It's not the first time we done it that way. Okay, I hear you. I'll have to speak with CEO about. About 15 minutes later, I get another call. CEO said, what if you don't want to go? You should just write a resignation letter. I am the only employee who knows how to do my job, but yeah, sure, I'll send my resignation letter right away. I was thinking about not doing it, so they had to terminate me and pay me termination compensation. But when I decided to be petty in a different way, in my country you had to give at least 2 weeks notice, unless both parties agree to shorter notice. So I write my letter and set my resignation day as 14th of April, which is 2 weeks. Shortly after it gets approved, did is done. And I get another call a bit later. So, will you be able to finish this project before you leave? I won't be able to do any work on that project before I leave. What? Why? You still have 2 weeks and we really need it done. Well, you see, I am on vacation right now. Last day of my vacation will be April 13th and I am resigning on 14th. Fallout. I recently got a message from ex-colleague I have friendly relationship with. Apparently they are in deep **T right now. Deadlines were missed, fines rolled in, and companies' accounts have been frozen. They even were unable to pay salaries for the last 2 months. They are probably toast, and if things go that way, they'll have to file bankruptcy. Don't worry, people will get paid in the end. In my country, salary deps have the highest priority when bankrupt business sell their assets. Downside? I still haven't received my compensation for my 120 saved vacation days. Anyway, thank you for watching.